are hosting on a very exciting arena of esports. I am Aditya Vasisht and I lead USIBC's work on media and entertainment and digital economy from India. And I'm backed by Jay Galish and Abhishek Kishore, based out of Washington, D.C. We have gathered here today for a conversation on one of the fastest growing segments in the media and entertainment sector, which is the esports. And this program is in partnership with the US Chamber's Global Innovation Policy Center, GIPC. But before we begin, I would like to mention a few housekeeping rules. First, that this session will be recorded and it will be made available on our social media platforms post the program. And I would also like to request our participants to please keep themselves on mute and keep your cameras off if not speaking, just to provide our speakers with appropriate screen presence. And if you have any questions and we would want you to engage with us, so please feel free to share them in the chat box and we'll raise them up with our speakers at the end of the conversation. So with that, I would also like to mention the program that we have today, where we have a very exciting conversation between a visionary in the new media segment, Rajan Navani. He's the Vice Chairman, Managing Director, and CEO of Jet Synthesis, and also a USIBC board member. And Victor Kao, who's a partner at RSM, whose practices focus on the media and entertainment sector. We also have with us Patrick Kilbride. He's the Senior Vice President at the GIPC, the Global Innovation Policy Center, as the US Chamber of Commerce. And these interactions, as you know, are a part of the initiative that USIPC launched in 2020 to help members understand the impact of the US India Corridor on the direction of media and entertainment sector and the growth that this sector has brought in the country. And conversations like these will help build, connect the US-India corridor through innovation and technology. I'd like to briefly mention about Patrick, and then I'm going to hand it over to him. That Patrick is the Senior Vice President at the Global Innovation Policy Center. He oversees the center's domestic, multilateral, and international programs and leads GIPC's work to promote intellectual property-driven innovation and creativity. He's also served as the executive office at the President of George W. Bush administration as Deputy Assistant to the USTR representative for intergovernmental affairs and public liaison. With that, I would like to give it over to Patrick, and the microphone is yours, Patrick. Go ahead.
Thank you, Aditya. Namaste, gamers. It's great to see everyone. Great to be here with Rajan Navani from the USIBC board. At the Global Innovation Policy Center, we work around the world to promote the innovative and creative sectors, including, of course, this emerging paradigm-shifting industry of gaming and esports. So we're very excited to be here today to help to drive this conversation. We know that when creators are freed up by good public policy, including strong copyright laws, to invest themselves in their energy, their passion, their creativity, great things happen. Years ago, in an analog world, an American wrestling coach used to train his wrestlers on a mantra of speed, agility, flexibility, strength, and coordination. Well, today in a digital world, we need exactly those same qualities, and our e-gaming, our gaming and esports industries are helping to build that for a new generation as they interact with the digital world. This is the new frontier. It's an exciting one. It's going to help determine cultural leadership, creative strength, and economic growth for countries around the world. And we're really delighted to have a true expert with us from RSM, a global advisory firm, sort of the middle market. We have Victor Kao to set the scene for us today. And Victor is a consulting partner with RSM and the national leader of a unique sector called video gaming and esports. Victor has spent time in India developing synergies and opportunities between the Indian and US markets for gaming and esports. And so he's particularly well placed to help us set up this conversation. At RSM, through the unique program that he heads, he's a resource to SMEs, he's a thought leader, and he's developing and curating our thought leadership around issues impacting the esports world, as well as the overall ecosystem for telecommunications, media and entertainment, and technology. So I'm really thrilled to have the chance to welcome Victor. I look forward, Victor, to your remarks and to just a terrific conversation today with all of our friends throughout the United States and India. Victor, over to you.
Perfect. Thanks so much for that friendly introduction there, Patrick. Appreciate that. So I'm personally excited to be here with Rajan. And so maybe what I can do quickly is introduce Rajan. And Rajan, I'd love to kind of fold into, just a really casual dialogue, right? This is meant to be a fireside chat. We want to talk very casually just about, the video gaming space and the ecosystem overall. And then certainly we can kind of probably dovetail a little bit more towards esport, because I recognize the fact that not everybody here is part of the video gaming industry. So I think kind of starting from a big picture macro level would certainly help. But with me, I have Rajan, and Rajan's been coined as the digital master blaster by Entrepreneur India. Rajan is the vice chairman and managing director of an Indian arm of the 80-year-old Jetline Group and the CEO of Jet Synthesis. Jetline Group's most innovative company in the digital media entertainment and breadth of the gaming ecosystem, including esports. So Rajan's also the founder and president of the Indian Digital Gaming Society, which is India's first industry-led body of gaming stakeholders from government to gaming entities. Rajan also wears the hat, as mentioned earlier, as the US IBC board member and is actively engaged in the work that they do within media and entertainment. So Rajan, it's great to have you here.
Thanks, Victor. A pleasure to be here with you as well, and look forward to our conversation in chat.
Absolutely. So Rajan, maybe you could explain to us a little bit more about Jet Synthesis, because I realize that maybe not everybody here is as familiar with them. So do you mind kind of spending maybe just, or saying a couple words about just an overall big picture of what Jet Synthesis does?
Yeah, so interestingly, Jet Synthesis was built to play a role in the daily digital lives of 1 billion plus Indians. The primary objective being, how do you capture the ABCD of an Indian consumer? And we go all the way up to Z now, but it's the astrology, Bollywood, cricket, devotion, entertainment, fintech, gaming, healthcare. So we're looking at being the digital platform on which Indians engage, and in order to be able to create world-class experiences for Indians, I think it's extremely important for us to be global. Because India has always been open to digital products and platforms from all around the world. So yeah, it's been an exciting journey, and we look forward to growing and strengthening this as we move on. Gaming is a very strong piece of our media entertainment business.
That's great. No, that's great. So I'm going to do a little bit of an icebreaker for us here. I'd love for you to describe maybe your most earliest or fondest memory of video gaming. Take us back to maybe the year, if possible, of when did you actually first get introduced to a video game and start playing video games?
Interesting question. So, I think video gaming, to me, the memories of the Atari, I think, we had to blow on the old cartridges, hoping they'd restart. And I think we've come a really long way from there, right? I mean, you look at the entire genesis, from the Atari to so many other devices. And today we have probably one of the most powerful devices sitting in our pockets, and millions of titles you can download in a matter of seconds. You don't have to, stand in line and wait for a release, and order and pre-order. And so many interesting old day memories, not relevant anymore. So yeah, it's been an exciting transition, for the world when it comes to video games.
It's funny when you mention blowing the cartridges. I don't know if even everybody on this call may understand or appreciate that. But in the Atari days, like when you had an Atari 2600 or even the original Nintendo Entertainment System, right, the NES, it was just, and it's funny because we didn't even have the internet then, but yet everybody knew that if it didn't work, you blow on the cartridge, you stick it in and see if it works then, right? It was very finicky, right? I think a lot of the consoles back then were extremely finicky. And so that certainly brings back a whole lot of memories there for sure.
Yeah, I think it's the same for many people around the world. I don't think it's anything different for people in other parts as well. Right? So I think
Yeah.
it's been brilliant. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like taking us back to like the old 8-track days and the cassettes, right? And I don't think a lot of people appreciate the fact that then went to a digital format with CDs and now MP3s or whatnot, right? So they'll never have to deal with those situations that we probably did when we were growing up with video gaming in itself. No, but that's all very interesting. So maybe what we could do is let's talk a little bit about the past of video gaming. Maybe even to the present where we're at right now, and then also the future of gaming, right? You mentioned the past. You mentioned Atari. There was consoles. Arcade was actually a big thing, right? So, I mean, Pong actually started, I believe it was like 1972. And so you think about how early the video gaming came to the consumer sector in the early 70s, right? So arcades was kind of like the first sort of intersection to computers and entertainment, right? Then you kind of graduated from there to starting to get to consoles, right? So I don't know if anybody even remembers like Intellivision or the Commodore 64 or the Atari 2600, right? Those were actually even before the Nintendo Entertainment Systems, right? But obviously NES kind of really globalized and made video gaming at home more of a thing, right? It was one of those utopian devices that you never thought you could play arcades at home. You always thought you'd have to go to, an arcade amusement park or whatnot and insert coins in, right? And so that happened in around 82, 83. You go further from there, consoles started to become a bigger thing. But I think what really just kind of lifted and proliferated and exponentially grew video games as a whole is probably the mobile device, right? You look at mobile platforms, and that's kind of when smartphones started to evolve with the iPhone or whatnot. And so today, I don't know if everybody may realize this, but the global revenues for video gaming as a whole, when you look at the entire ecosystem, it's $175 billion industry. And so that's huge, right? And what's even more fascinating about that number is half of that number is mobile, right? So there's roughly about $85 billion in global revenues in the mobile sector. And then if you look at then PC and console, PC is probably about 30%, console's about, the remaining 20%. So it's a really interesting pie, and mobile clearly has grown since 2010. So that's kind of what led us to where we're at today. Right now, we're kind of in a pandemic situation where there's clearly a lot of people playing video games, right? What are your thoughts about all of this? Like when you see this happening right now, and maybe if you can kind of help us understand a little bit more about what's going on in India, right?
No, you're absolutely right. I think while you said mobile is the highest component in terms of percentage of revenue, it's also the fastest growing, even at that size and scale. So I think, that's definitely one thing that has triggered this whole boom of gaming in a country like India. While India really on the Android platform has probably the highest downloads in the world, by quite a margin, even compared to the US and other parts of the world. The problem or the challenge in India is that the size of the industry, even today, is probably sub $1 billion, right? So the opportunity for catch up and for growth from here on is immense. So think about it: $170 billion industry, as you said, and India is just at $1 billion, and it has 1/6 of the world population. With an average of 1.1 or 1.2, mobile phones with each, citizen of the country. So I think the opportunity, therefore, is immense. I think the entire transition, I think for India, from a casual gamer to a mid-core gamer to a core gamer to a professional gamer, really captures the value chain, of gaming from a gamer's perspective. But then again, if you look at it from the new technologies that are going to come and shape what will happen in India, and why I'm pretty much optimistic that India will jump a few curves and accelerate through some misses, like what happened in the mobile phone. India people didn't have LAN connections or landline connections, and just everyone got a mobile phone. We see the jump in gaming, and with cloud gaming and all that likely to become extremely popular with gaming on the move. I think the opportunity is much greater, and it's interesting. Why Indians or people in India did not, do not really look at gaming as something that you pay for is because, we skipped that whole generation of console and PC where, you had to pay to play a game, right? You had to download a game in India, because on mobile everything came on, the free to play platform and the freemium platform, so I think people in India are getting used to, what gaming is and how they can become more integrated, at a global level on that side. So I think very exciting times, and there's a lot that's been happening in the country. The government's, very involved now, looking at this as a promising sector. India is poised to be a $5 trillion economy over the next, 5 to 7 years, and $1 trillion of that is going to come from new age businesses. And I'm sure gaming is expected to have, a 50-60% growth year on year from here on. So exciting times.
Wow. So let's stay with the present here, right? Let's talk about the pandemic, because I'm curious what happened in India, right? So when the pandemic started, entering into India, lockdown started happening. I'm curious did India see the same thing as maybe the rest of the global countries, in which there was a huge lift, a huge spike? I mean, I did read news about the fact that, there were certainly some challenges, I think, with, tensions between China as well. Shutting down certain, like PUBG was a good example of that, right? There was sort of this lack of sort of trust and loyalty now with China, and even in the U.S., right? We started being, scrutinizing heavily in certain areas, right? Did you guys see, huge spikes? Did you see dips? Like, how did that sort of evolve over the last year since March?
The best way to put it, Victor, is, what we were hoping to have happened, in the next, say, 24 or 30 months, happened in a matter of 6 months, right? So I would say the acceleration that happened in the initial days of the pandemic, of course, the first 15 days, I think people were just getting used to what was happening, but the engagement rates that we saw, the amount of people who had started to engage with gaming, saw significant jumps, right? And many of our titles, that were already out there on the mobile phones of people, saw very quick uptake, in consumption, right? So if it's on your phone, you're playing 40 minutes a day, so we have a cricket game with Sachin Tendulkar where people are playing, anyway playing 40, 45 minutes a day. It just like went up 60, 70% in a matter of few days, right? On an average. So I think that was the first initial reaction. And then, when people started to engage deeper, they had more time, they were looking for more games, etc. That's when some of the newer games and all, kind of started to get, part of people's daily gaming routine or activity. The interesting part is that because there was no other sport, so we founded India's, which is India's largest esport company today, and I must tell you that we were literally waiting for something like this to even define, what is this whole business of, esport and how do people compete on an electronic platform or a game, and I think the pandemic, because there was no other sport happening, the streaming of esports, the streaming of gaming, influencers starting to, take on gaming, all of that saw, I think, a significant uptake, in that period. And while, from a revenue perspective, it did lead to some growth, which would be about 30-40%. It was not equivalent to the engagement growth, right? Primarily, as I said, because the in-app purchases, the freemium model is still maturing in a country like India. But again, I think as the pandemic, started to play out, and the China pressure came on, what you rightly mentioned, and apps started getting banned. The Indian developers or Indian games or especially Western titles, all started to do a little better, from an India side. But more than that, I think it's given Indian companies or companies based in India, the opportunity to now look at global valuation. So if you look at what Chinese companies and many others leveraged or benefited from was the broad base, like as I said, the large download base that happens from India, and the demonetization of the West, right? So I think that combination of having a great product today which is monetizing well, and the future is what was driving it. And I think that's the time now for Indian companies to really come in and make that happen, and for other companies too in a country like India. So I think it's been very interesting because there have been so many different things that have happened during this period. It's crazy, and investment into data, and companies like ours announce fresh capital infusion, growing to expand into global markets. So I think unfortunate times as a pandemic, but for the gaming industry, it's actually been pretty much a boom time.
Yeah. I'd love to kind of get your perspectives on the future of gaming in India. And you mentioned part of this earlier, where there's literally just about $1 billion, right, revenue generated in India. When you look at the grand scheme of 175, there's clearly a lot of there's clearly a big gap there. You also mentioned earlier about infrastructure, right? And right now, the infrastructure for probably mobile is probably even better than sometimes even broadband infrastructure, right? But when you think about the future of India, and you look at mobile versus PC and console, right? What are your thoughts as far as what do you think the next 3 to 5 years is going to overcome, right? Because PCs and console does require a good amount of disposable income, right? There's the affordability index as well. So you have to kind of put that in play versus a cell phone. It's a lot more affordable. It's a much affordable platform, and it's a widespread platform. So can you touch upon a little bit about where you think things are going to just continue to just exponentially grow? Is it still going to be in mobile? Do you think PC or console even has a fighting chance? And is much of this going to be determined on just the continued development of infrastructure such as 5G?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. And, I think one of the reasons why, in India, we never saw the growth of console or even PC gaming earlier, because, in a household, when they were kind of probably making a decision, right, they bought a better television, with the same amount of, cash to buy a console, right? Because you had to go and buy a separate piece of hardware, to kind of play a game. And with the mobile, that just changed, right? And I think the computer aspect is also one which I think is now playing out. So while for esport you need high-end computers and things like that, what tends to happen is that the PC or people who have that and are using it for different purposes, are continuing to use that from a gaming perspective and now building on that. So I think the popularity of gaming and particularly esport, and people knowing that if they want to become professional gamers, they need to invest in some hardware, is driving the engagement, at least on the PC side. We power the Steam platforms, last payment gateway for India, and we've seen again 200-300% jump with Indian payment models and other things that are happening. So I think the one good part about the India and its future is the fact that the mobile base of gamers is going to be so much larger than everything else, right? And I think therefore the opportunity today to take that same mobile gamer and give him the experience, him or her the experience of what it is to get better in the sport, to make it as a game. How do you understand different aspects of gaming? And India's gaming ecosystem is right now very cluttered because, whether it's fantasy sport, whether it's real money gaming, all of these are conversations that are happening today in India. And I think regulators, government, all are now trying to define, what is gaming and what is not gaming. So, I think India will emerge, with a model which I think is a little different from what the rest of the world has had, given that we are starting off from here, and now therefore have an opportunity, like what you rightly said, with 5G, to be able to create an ecosystem in gaming that will be futuristic, right? That will be what the rest of the world will also experience in a year or 2 years, at the same time at which India will come in. So I see that as a big plus for India, and then using that to capitalize further, to become a true part of the global gaming ecosystem.
Yeah, no, that's all very interesting. And on that note, because you kind of mentioned just the gaming ecosystem itself, maybe we talk a little bit about the video gaming ecosystem and what does that really mean? Because I think traditionally, when most people think about video gaming, they envision maybe a teenager, you know, in a basement or, you know, in a den or whatever it may be, right? And just playing video games. And that's what a lot of people think about video gaming. But video gaming and the ecosystem has certainly evolved to more than just a user playing a game, you know, on a console or a controller, right? And when you think about that ecosystem, it's spread out to things like, for example, hardware, right? You look at computers, you look at mice, you look at even mouse pads, you look at gaming chairs, like all of that has significantly grown. And the technology of that is just, it's something that you never would have thought there'd be technology in a keyboard, right? But every millisecond to a gamer counts, right? And every latency counts to a gamer as well. So gamers don't even like to have wireless devices. They want to be plugged in, right? Because they don't want to deal with that potential latency, right? So hardware is becoming very important. Streaming is obviously very important, as I'm sure you're much well aware of with Jet Synthesis, right? We never used to video record ourselves playing and posting that on the internet and having millions of people watching that, right? So streaming and broadcasting, now there's a lot of dedicated gaming channels now on television cable lineups or whatnot. So there's even the broadcasting aspect, right? You know, you think about like film, you think about television, right? There's now TV series that are based on games such as Sonic the Hedgehog, right? Or even Mario Brothers, Pokemon, for example, right? You look at film, right? There's also esports, right? Esports is a big thing. So there's a lot of different things that are evolving here on the video gaming ecosystem. Can you touch upon what that looks like maybe in India? Like, where do you see those certain fragments of the gaming ecosystem now really sort of taking off?
You know, it's interesting you talk of the ecosystem play. You know, when we started to define what the gaming ecosystem in India would comprise of, and, you know, I'm the president of the Indian Digital Gaming Society, and we were, conversing with the government that how should this body be formed. You know, we felt that that ecosystem is going to be everything that involves gaming from a perspective of business development, etc. But most importantly, the gamer. You know, so it's all the things that you talked of, right? You talked of hardware, you talked of gaming, keyboards or chairs, and everything in a way evolves or revolves around a gamer. And we have 400 million of them in India, right, already. So you can just imagine if we were to take all of that. So say, for example, we have a esport tournament, and I must say it's pretty interesting that for a country that is so new in gaming, we were able to host the largest ESL 1 tournament in India. It was transmitted in 67 countries with about 50 different languages, had 200 Germans, engineers coming to India, putting up a large show, and there were millions of people who were watching. People came to watch, and the whole entire esport event physically. And what I'm trying to get at is that as these kind of opportunities unlock with more relevant localized titles, everything begins to change. So, like we see in Hollywood, right? There are games. So with Bollywood, with some of the most popular movies, initially people were looking at gaming as a way of engagement, with what could happen in a sequel to the movie. As a matter of fact, we've done that both in India and and in Hollywood, where you really engage between two sequels of a movie, on the game, and you engage people differently, right? Literally looking at them in a manner in which you can, be able to derive what the next film should be. Education. I mean, with this whole pandemic, the growth of learning, moving again to a learner-centric, student who is also possibly a gamer. There's no better way to teach that person that, to get them engaged through an exercise that involves gaming.
Right.
So I always believe that, gaming is something that is just about, competing, and competitiveness is built, in us right from, grade 1 in school. You're, always ranked against someone, and it's natural, right? So I think we're going to see a big surge in the use of this kind of a thought process, and it'll cut across pretty much many things. Media rights, Victor, is becoming a big aspect of what streaming and broadcast would be in gaming. So I think, it's something waiting to, to unlock, and, particularly with esports now as part of the Asian Games and the Olympics, looking at it as a medal sport, I think a lot more, will change. But I know you also have had a lot of good experiences in this space, and how do you also see, this thing evolving, right, in other parts of the world, or maybe even in the US?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm sure US is probably going to look different than every other country. I think every country is going to look differently depending on culture, infrastructure, opportunities, right? So you think about the US, that's very keen on entertainment, right? So you look at movies, television, and even music. I would say in the US, what's pretty fascinating now at this point is the amount of folks that are actually streaming and that are watching streaming. So Twitch is obviously a really big thing in the US. And it's crazy to think that during the pandemic, or let's just talk about pre-pandemic, before the pandemic, there was about an average of 2.5 billion hours that were streamed in a quarter. That to me is just a fascinating number in itself. But because of the pandemic, it more than doubled, and it's about 5.5 billion hours of streaming of people just on Twitch, just watching folks play the video game. Really insane numbers. What's also kind of insane is you think about Roblox, right? And Roblox, because they're about to IPO pretty soon, they had to release their S1s. And so they gave out a lot of interesting, very intriguing information about their platform and how many hours of engagement. In Roblox in itself, which is a game that's more geared towards maybe like the 9 to 13-year-olds, but it is a platform. They have numerous games on there. They clock in 9 billion hours on a quarterly basis. And it's just phenomenal to just think about that, because these are kids, that are 9 years old up to 13. And that just small niche is watching that much. And it didn't really resonate with me until like I have kids, they're 9 and 11. And I think about that and I'm like, wow, that actually kind of makes sense, because they're spending 2.5 to 3 hours per day just on Roblox, right? So the hours of engagement of these platforms are just increasing. I think the number of kids that are getting into the ecosystem is increasing. And so then you look at like this as like, when you look at the bigger ecosystem, like with music, right? It's pretty interesting what these video gaming platforms have done. In the US, they're now starting to evolve digital concerts onto a platform. So we've had some pretty, large or artists that have actually done concerts on a platform. So for example, with Roblox, there's a rapper called Lil Nas X, and he did a virtual concert on Roblox and garnered more than 135 million users on the platform. So it was really incredible to see that much engagement on that. There's another platform called Fortnite, and that's owned by Epic Games, and they had a rapper named Travis Scott who performed a digital concert as well. And again, over 100 million users were engaged into this concert. So you think about all the intersections of entertainment going on a video game, and it's quite fascinating because there's just so many eyes on this platform. So that's why this ecosystem is really intriguing, very interesting, and it's the reason why more and more professional services are looking more into it, because it's not just about people playing a game. It's everything that's sort of converging and evolving, and video gaming being sort of at that spotlight that brings a lot of folks together. So that's kind of what we're seeing in the US. Much of North America is like that as well. And I know China and Korea are starting to evolve in that sort of space as well. But
India, just to add one quick point to that, is that, we have a lot of vernacular music, artists, celebrities, that are part of our ecosystem. We look at that across all of these verticals that we talked about, be it music, be it cricket, and other things. And I must say that, interestingly, each of our, video game titles that are released, there are songs produced and sung, with the name of the games and, stuff like that, and how do you engage, which again garner, tens and hundreds of millions of views on YouTube, to be able to convey the excitement of what that game outcome could mean, for gamers, right? So I think, while on certain platforms you have artists coming to get, following, and then once they get the following, they become the influencers, to grow the ecosystem of gaming further. So I think, in some way it can become a virtuous cycle, that can, increase this interactive two-way form of entertainment, and make it more standard, in terms of how, the future will be. So I think very interesting ways in which this whole thing will play out.
So maybe we could talk a little bit more about esports, right? And let's dive a little bit deeper of that. Maybe if you can help even define what does esport mean to you, or even in India, because I know sometimes esports could be defined very differently depending on who you're talking to, the country that you're speaking with as well.
Yeah, so in India, this is definitely something which is, very current and a very strong subject of discussion. And, I've been personally involved, because of the role I play, with, the new India of 2022 of Prime Minister Modi's government, as well as, in the other relationships in building new sectors, for India. And I see this discussion, going on extensively within government is how do we even define, esports? So I think what seems to be emerging is that, esport really has to be, between two entities, right? It has to be something between two individuals, two teams. It has to be competitive, and it has to be on an electronic device. So PC, console, mobile, VR, whatever, but it's an electronic device, right? Where does the licensing and ownership lie? So really the game owner or the publisher, is the entity that either operates or licenses the esport, right? So unlike any other game, which is played in the physical world, here really literally the publisher owns the game and, therefore becomes a true federation controller in a way, for that, right? And I think that's the beauty where, you're going to see different kinds of games which will have, different level of engagement. And then, you can really see how those will translate, into a larger play globally. So it's a very interesting way. And, I think one key thing which I think is emerging in India, charging players to play a game is really not something that is acceptable, because in India, one is also looking at, e-tournaments, or real money gaming kind of tournaments where you pay to enter, and then whatever is the prize pool you win and you take a share of that. Very similar to fantasy. So I think these are all getting defined, and esports is definitely not that. I think the other model is the sponsorship model, media rights, franchising, where that's how competitive gaming from esports derives its monetization. And of course, whatever the direct user monetization that tends to happen. So I think, there are the way, even in a way, esports is looked at the sports media business because of that. So it's got some excitement there. Another interesting aspect is that it needs to involve some level of physical skills. So if you see fingers, hand, mouth, speech, eyesight, strategy, ears, all of that is being used, when you want to really become, someone, the best in a particular sport. There is no pay to win, and I really think the key is that these are really skill-based, and not chance-based. So maybe 95% skill, but the luck element is very, very small. So being able to define that. Now, interestingly, in a country like India, sports that are played physically, and if there's an electronic version of that being played, becomes very easily acceptable, in terms of, how could that become, an e-sport. We acquired one of India's largest, again, cricket gaming. We've developed other games as well, which has over 100 million downloads, over 10 million, people playing it monthly, and there, from that 10 million, we really need to pick 200 of the best players, right? And that's the excitement where, how do you really create a level of skill that can, enable from a mobile game to pick 200 of the best players out of a 10 million, right? And what does it take? And doing it around all these fairness principles, that we talked about. So I think, that's how eSport seems to be evolving in India differently from, what fantasy is, what, gaming otherwise is defined as, or real money gaming is defined. So, I know I've taken a little time, but I just thought it will give a better perspective, to everyone here.
Well, I like what you said about, esports being so skill-based. And a lot of times people think about, e-gaming and video gaming as more of chance and luck, but it really isn't. And the reason why you probably see most esports professionals on the average of age of 15 to almost at 23. And it really is that sweet spot. Because I think what most people may not understand is esports and playing at that competitive level requires so much cognitive thinking and cognitive skills, reflex, etc. And it's funny because you think about, okay, well, 23, that's not even that old, but after about 23 to 24, it starts to taper off. And a lot of that reason is because you start to lose those cognitive skills. You start to lose those reflexes, and that really is what differentiates the best, because you have to process so much information in milliseconds to be able to adapt and react and understand what your opponent's going to do. So it is a very interesting field that I don't think a lot of folks even take a strong appreciation towards, and they think professional sports is more of a sport. And it is, it's athletic. I get the fact that, it's cardio, right? There's an element of cardio in there, but I don't think what other people understand about professional sports in itself is that also requires a large amount of cognitive skills, right? You have to be able to react, adapt, and sort of think about all the different scenarios in a situation in professional sports, and that all translate into video gaming as well. So for folks to say that, well, it's video gaming, like that's not a sport, I don't think they truly appreciate the commonality and the similarities between regular sports and esports. I'm curious if you kind of see the same thing over at India, or if you're seeing the same sort of trend lines as well.
Yeah, it's beginning to happen. As I said, we now have a global play in the US, in Japan, in Europe, and obviously it's nowhere, as advanced as that. But people are getting used to this whole concept of esport teams, team owners, leagues being created, broadcast partners, as I said, media rights, high level of tournament organizers, so the ecosystem, again, just within esport is now becoming, pretty much the way it is in other parts of the world. So yeah, I think it's, it's emerging, and therefore, as I said, the catch-up power means that there will be high growth, over the next several years.
I'm curious to get your perspective. What is the culture like of the, like as parents, watching their kids play video games and watching their kids be involved in esports? Is there this sort of generational gap? Because I know when I grew up, right, my parents would not allow me to play video games. They would hide the controllers. My brother and I would obviously would always try to find where the controller is for the Nintendo, because we were playing it all the time, right? But like me now, understanding this ecosystem, I've got kids, and I'm actually encouraging them to play, because I'm like, this is kind of the future, right? And so if they're not going to play basketball or whatever it may be, why not get them involved in this particular sport? But does India have what's the culture like? What's the stigma like between generations as far as a kid playing a video game and being in the esports?
No, I think it's the same stigma, and it's interesting. We're going back to where we started, right? Exactly the memories that you talk of, I have the same memories. But what is happening today, and I still remember, the first India gaming show, which was done on a large field. We had about 100,000 people come in, and I chaired that show in 2017. And invited the technology minister to come in, because we didn't even know whether it needs to be, entertainment, the information broadcasting ministry or the technology minister. And I know he came in there and he looked at the industry and he saw everything and he experienced, because we had a live exhibition, and he says, I was so wrong. He said, all this entire period, I told my kids, you should not game, you should not do this. And today, I did not even have a clue that, there is an industry of this size and scale that, exists globally. So I think changing mindsets of people is so critical, right? And I think most times parents, do take it that, gaming is done in the spare time, it tends to get a little addictive, and a lot of that is true, right? So I think responsible gaming, gaming for good are all themes that I think, the industry needs to be, aware of, try and, put in enough safeguards to ensure that it doesn't become all of that. But as we just spoke, right, the number of skills that you can acquire by being a gamer, fast thinking, rapid, kind of ability to do many things. And I think what has become clear now is the ability to earn a livelihood, so I think, we had this thing with Mountain Dew and Pepsi, where we took all the, people who were winners or part of the esport things and put a photograph on a bottle, on a Pepsi bottle, which they went back and showed to their parents. I'm famous in the country right now because, I am featuring on a bottle which is an FMCG product, right? And now, so to create a sense of recognition, particularly to those who are professional esport players. We know, the endorsement money that, the top esport player in Korea, I think, got was about $7 million a year. So, if you are a good player and you're able to look at this, as a livelihood opportunities, you have casters, you have so many other people in the ecosystem, graphic artists. I mean, you could be involved in a gaming, opportunity or livelihood today with a lot less stigma than you could have ever been in the past. Because earlier, smaller studios, four friends tried to get together, hide from everyone, and try and do something. I think that's changed, rapidly. And one last point is, in India, interestingly, like I was telling you, we had to find ways in which people would pay for games. So we have this ability to send scratch cards to people's homes. It costs about maybe $50 to collect $10, right? So in India, you can go send a person to someone's home and collect money at $50, and sometimes, you have to do that because the kids, they have cash, they don't have credit cards, they don't have other ways of paying, and they save their pocket money, and then they want to invest in gaming, right? And I think that level or the number of people who do that is huge. So rather than going to your parent and saying, hey, I want you to, spend for my game, they used to collect the pocket money and they'll go and do a scratch card. And, now because everything's gone digital and online, the only way is to send that to their house. So, these models are all very different models that we see in a country like India, unlike many other parts of the world. So the culture is different, in many ways. But at the end of the day, I think, human beings, the psychology, it takes over, right? In something.
Yeah.
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 And I think you hit the nail on the head. It's all about responsible gaming, right? And I think the message to all parents out there, right? Because your kids, by all means, it's 100% proven that your kid will eventually get involved in a video gaming. It doesn't matter whether it's mobile, PC, or console. They will touch a video game as much as you want to try and prevent it. But I think the message to parents here is that it's okay, right? It's okay so long as you do it in moderation. It actually could be good for them because it does, create collaboration, teamwork, right? Cognitive skills, all of that stuff, right? And I just remember growing up, like, we had a computer and my mom would always tell me, stop going on the computer. This isn't going to help you. But had I not gone on the computer, had I not been video gaming, I probably would not be where I'm at right now. So I think it's a good message to parents. And maybe for Jet Synthesis, maybe it's a good marketing campaign, right? Market to the parents. Don't market to the kids, right? Because the parents are probably the biggest roadblocks in the stop signs of letting kids play.
Interestingly, in the pandemic, I know many people, who were parents, right, started gaming back themselves, right? Because, for many years you didn't get the time, you didn't have the opportunity, and now, it was different, right? So I know so many people who said, it was amazing that, after 20 years, we got back to doing something that we enjoyed, maybe 20 or 30 years ago, and in a very different format. So I think, you're right, that's a great way to target and to build, new kind of games and titles for them.
Yeah. So last question here, because I know we got to wrap it up here soon, but when you think about the cross collaboration and the synergies between US and India, where are you seeing some of those stop signs, those roadblocks from really allowing for a much better collaboration between the two countries? Because there's so much opportunity for both of us, and not even just US and India, but just globally, right? But let's just focus on this, right? Because there are a lot of companies who do integrate very well, a lot of ecosystems, a lot of industries that integrate really well with India and US. Where do you see the roadblocks, the challenges, and what do you think we could do differently?
So, to answer this question, I think it's good to look at, you talked about the $175 billion industry, right? How is it broken up globally? So, US and China both are about at 30 odd billion. Then you have Japan and Korea at about 17, 18 billion, 16, and many other countries in Europe and others comprising that. So if you just look at the sheer size of the market, and as I said, when you come from a country like India, which is, at about 1 billion, the opportunities actually are across the board. And so for us, like as Jet Synthesis, we've invested heavily in the US, India, of course, UK, India, but very largely in the Japan, India, space today. Because I think, a market which is so mature, which has, created some great titles, some great, kind of processes around gaming, could really, benefit significantly by, looking at global markets for those products, right? So India becomes a great partner, for Japan to really not only create products in each other's countries, but also go global. And I think the US-India partnership is actually, even stronger when it comes to the size of the opportunity, because, it works brilliantly, like every other aspect of the technology world, right? We've seen IT engineers from India, cater to US solutions so much better than, many other parts of the world. The time difference, the English language, the ability to bring different skills, be it, technology, creative, art, design, so I think the lower cost of India, the high technology of the US, combined with a mature gaming market there, really actually is the initial opportunity that I see before, the US-India opportunity actually, resulting in global titles around the world. So I really look at India as, that alternative, what you talked of, to China in a way that will become a market probably as large and as significant, to global players. The other interesting, piece is that, we always talk of gaming, as a part of an entertainment ecosystem, right? We've seen the Hollywood-Bollywood connect. We've seen the ways in which, people entertain across different kinds of sports, different kinds of, media properties, etc. And I think gaming, in some shape and form, offers all of that. And we're going to see a lot of innovation on the content side of gaming, streaming side, broadcast side, and I think that's again a place where US India can, take a tremendous, opportunity to move, quickly. It's because again, large base of people who speak and understand English in India, with a US a market open out there, I think can be huge. So yeah, so many ways in which that can happen, and I must therefore compliment USIBC, for investing in this entire media and entertainment sector, and this is a series that we've been doing, with them to see how we can really strengthen this corridor. So my word of thanks also goes out to USIBC for that.
Well, great. I mean, Rajan, it certainly has been a pleasure getting to know you throughout this journey, though. I know we've spoken even beforehand. We met for the first time several weeks ago, but I'm personally inspired because, I've spent some time in India myself, and I see so much opportunity and synergies between these two countries. So I wholeheartedly, completely agree with you that there really is a much bigger opportunity here. And I'm actually starting to see that video gaming companies and even console companies are actually looking very closely at India as far as, well, number one, how do they penetrate, a billion plus population, right? But then there's a lot of things that India does that's better than the US, right? And there's these strengths that India has that sort of complements the weaknesses that we have here in the US. So definitely, I'm looking forward to further synergies, further collaboration between the two countries, and even for you and I just to kind of continue chatting on this, because it's such an interesting space, right? And to see what's going to happen post-pandemic it really is a little bit of a wild card, right? Is this video gaming trajectory really going to continue once people go back to work, people go back to school, or whatever it may be, right? So it'll be interesting to see what happens there.
It's to your this point that you just said, right? The future is so interesting, particularly in countries like India, because I'm on the I'm a CEO nominated on the India-Japan government to government track of Prime Minister Modi, and I went as the New Age Media Entertainment CEO from India, and my counterpart in Japan was was the chairman of Sony, Hirai-san, and we both spent some amount of time, and we had to present to the two prime ministers, on the future of entertainment and the future of gaming and the opportunity. And we came from two such different, kind of backgrounds, right? India is about small ticket, millions of people, monetization, new and adaptive and innovative. and there's this traditional, strong ability to understand the space and deeply monetize the space in countries like the US and Japan, right? And how do we really therefore merge the two to be the new global normal? And I think the pandemic has really, shaped that up, right? Very, very significantly. So I think there are just so many opportunities that exist, in this entire, space that it's like what you rightly said is not even funny. We can keep talking, for a long time, but I know our time is up, and I just want to say that the next event that will come up on this esports subject is that we're going to really have an esports tournament, and it's going to be in a sport that's massively played in India and probably have a US and India competition. We are shooting for that on 30th of March, and I think that will deepen this conversation to a more experiential level. So, really excited, about that, as well. So, been great chatting with you, Victor, and, a real, fun to do that. And I also want to acknowledge Andrea Silva from the US Department of Commerce. She's here, she's the global team leader for media and entertainment from the US Department of Commerce, and has, supported this. Andrea, would you like to just say a few words before Aditya takes over?
Thank you so much, Rajan and Victor and Aditi and Jay. It's really an honor to be here. This is a really fun, dynamic panel, very interesting. At the Department of Commerce, we are very excited to support these initiatives in bilateral trade and otherwise. And with the U.S.-India Business Council, we have a strategic partnership program which is used to leverage relationships with trade associations, chambers of commerce, so that we can share critical export and investment information with millions of U.S. businesses. And I'm certain that the video game sectors are going to continue to thrive in India, an incredibly dynamic market. And thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you. Thanks, Andrea. I think it's been a really exciting conversation. I want to just quickly check with our audience if they have any questions, or I mean, it's so engaging. So maybe if you want to raise your hand and see if there's any question that you would like to raise with our able panelist speakers here. And if not, I'd like to give back some time to your calendars then. But just to really thank both of you gentlemen, it's been a great conversation today. I think it's one of the most refreshing conversations at a 10:30 evening in India. But it has taken us through our first love, that's video games, to the kind of potential that it has now, and we've seen a great shift in this segment over the decades, especially with the access to in the country with the access to smartphones and internet. Of course, India is the largest growing internet population in the world, and we see a huge potential in this sector to actually showcase and the great potential that this sector has, and this overall sector in IT services through R&D, through new emerging innovation. It can become one of the most fastest growing sectors in media and entertainment. And we are very positive that this change will bring. So as Rajan mentioned, I would also like to mention the next set of engagements that are planned in this area of esports is through a one-of-its-kind esports competition, which will help us understand the applicability and also unleash the potential of this sector. And we are hosting this on 30th of March. So I'd like everyone to stay tuned for this program and for the updates that we're going to put forward. And I'd like to really, again, thank Victor and Rajan for a great conversation. And for everybody else who's listening to us, please feel free to reach out to us for anything, and we would be more than happy to help. So with that, I'd like to end this conversation and wish you all a good day, evening, or a night ahead. Thank you very much. Namaste.
Thank you.